This episode of the CyberWire is made possible in part by Pantera. The newly minted unicorn is taking a whole new approach to security validation, allowing every organization to continuously test the integrity of all cybersecurity layers, including against ransomware and leaked credentials, by emulating real-world attacks at scale to pinpoint the most exploitable vulnerabilities and prioritize patching with a risk-based remediation plan. Know your risk in real time, all day, every day. Learn more at Pantera.io. Cyberattacks against Poland's and Slovakia's parliaments. The U.S. 2022 National Defense Strategy is out. Insights from SecurityWeek's ICS Cybersecurity Conference. The importance of zero trust in industrial environments. Malek Ben Salem from Accenture on machine language security and safety. Our guest is Nick Schneider of Arctic Wolf to discuss why he believes 2023 will see a resurgence of ransomware. And CISA issues 4 more ICS Advisories. From the CyberWire studios at Data Tribe, I'm Dave Bittner with your CyberWire summary for Friday, October 28th, 2022. In a recent development in Russia's hybrid war, more distributed denial of service attacks appear to have hit Eastern European NATO members. According to AFP, the parliaments of both Poland and Slovakia sustained cyberattacks yesterday that knocked out various parliamentary networks, including those supporting both voting and telecommunications. From descriptions of the attacks, the incidents appear to be DDoS attacks. Reuters quotes Bruno Kolar, Speaker of the Slovak Parliament, as saying, "We have identified a cybersecurity incident. There is a signal coming from some point which jams our systems, computers. We cannot even serve the lawmakers in our cafeteria." Polish sources say that some of the attack traffic originated from Russia, and it's widely suspected that the attacks were a Russian operation retaliating for Polish and Slovak support for Ukraine in the present war. On Wednesday, just a day before the attacks, Poland's parliament had passed a resolution condemning Russia as a terrorist state. Slovakia had recently decided to send Ukraine warplanes in exchange for U.S. fighters to be delivered later. The U.S. has published its National Defense Strategy. The document highlights the threat from 4 familiar adversaries, China, Russia, North Korea, and Iran, all of whom deploy notable offensive cyber capabilities. The strategy emphasizes deterrence, and with respect to cyberspace, deterrence through resilience, which it suggests is achievable through a range of measures that include encryption and implementation of zero-trust principles. The document also says that the U.S. will pursue deterrence by direct and collective cost imposition, which could include offensive cyber operations. This represents a more assertive use of national power in cyberspace. The document says, "We will conduct cyberspace operations to degrade competitors' malicious cyber activity and to prepare cyber capabilities to be used in crisis or conflict." This week at SecurityWeek's ICS Cybersecurity Conference, OT ICS Security Practice Manager at IBM, David Lancaster Jr., described a challenge industrial operations face, distinguishing system failures, asset failures, and cyber incidents. The question, an important one in organizing resiliency, has gained salience as the air gaps that once protected legacy industrial systems disappear. Lancaster said, "Fully air-gapped systems where we are today truly don't exist," and explained that the line between IT and OT has blurred as legacy systems are decommissioned and replaced by digitally connected IoT systems. This convergence has occurred as manufacturing and critical infrastructure have grown increasingly attractive to threat actors. It used to be conventional wisdom that many industrial systems were protected by default. They used legacy equipment that preceded widespread networking, and so they came with built-in air gaps. As older systems age out and are replaced by newer, more highly networked technologies, that former advantage has been vanishing, and it seems now to have largely disappeared. There are few of those legacy air-gapped by default systems remaining in the field, and there are fewer of them all the time. And during another panel discussion at SecurityWeek's ICS Cybersecurity Conference yesterday, Del Rodias, iStarry's client partner for industrials in the Americas, and Jack Oden, Program Director, ICS Cybersecurity SME at Parsons, outlined the importance of applying zero-trust strategy in ICS environments. The principles they discussed are well-established best practices. One of them is essential to any risk management process, identifying what needs to be protected. Put another way, this can be seen as assessing the consequence part of the risk calculation. Rodias said, "When I think about the things you need to do to get started in operation technology environments, the steps that you would apply in IT are also applicable, but just in a different context." And, he added, visibility comes first, knowing what you have. He stated, "The first step is trying to understand what are your assets that are in your environment. What are your crown jewels?" So getting that visibility, getting that understanding of risk is the first step. And then the next step is really using the capabilities that you have to profile the traffic between the different assets to and from the different crown jewels. And that'll really help you in terms of understanding how you might need to segment your network. And once you kind of have that segmentation, that's when you start applying the granular policy. Oden explained that zero trust can help prevent attackers from moving around within both IT and OT networks. He said, "The bottom line to me is to literally trust no one or nothing and always verify. If you keep that in mind, I think that's the most fundamental thing you can apply here." Oden continued, "We have been talking for decades about perimeter security, and once you've verified the identity of the person, hopefully with good password security and maybe multi-factor authentication, once they're in, for the most part, my customers were just letting those people have their way. But if you think more about it, inside your network, you've got a lot going on. Again, in the crown jewels concept. And where are people coming from into your network? They're usually coming through the corporate network and then coming down to OT. And so up there, there's a lot of stuff going on. But no matter what the operation is, that OT operation is critical to you, whether it's the HVAC operation that keeps your computer center running, or if you're a power plant providing power to the local community." The SANS 2022 OT ICS Cybersecurity Report, sponsored by Nozomi Networks, was released this morning. It covers the current state of industrial control system security. The survey indicates that OT, that is operational technology cybersecurity, has improved in certain respects compared to last year's survey. Ransomware comprised the leading threat, closely followed by nation-state attacks, non-ransomware cybercrime, and threats to hardware and software supply chains. One disturbing trend is a rise in attacks where engineering workstations were the initial attack vector. But in general, most attacks, 41%, arrived through IT networks and often spread through removable media. Nozomi Networks co-founder and CPO Andrea Carcano summarized the results, stating, "While the threat actors are honing their ICS skills, the specialized technologies and frameworks for a solid defense are available. The survey found that more organizations are proactively using them. Still, there's work to be done. We encourage others to take steps now to minimize risk and maximize resilience." And finally, the U.S. Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency yesterday released 4 industrial control system advisories. Operators should check their systems and take appropriate action. Coming up after the break, Malek Ben Salem from Accenture on machine language security and safety. Our guest is Nick Schneider from Arctic Wolf to discuss why he believes 2023 will see a resurgence of ransomware. Stick around. And now, a word from our sponsor, LookingGlass Cyber, a global leader in cybersecurity. If you're struggling with answering the question, what does my organization look like from an attacker's point of view? There's some research from Gartner that can help you. According to Gartner, attack surface management involves a combination of people, processes, technologies, and services deployed to continuously discover, inventory, and manage an organization's assets. So why is this important? Comprehensive visibility into your assets, and in LookingGlass's opinion, especially those that are connected to the internet, can help reduce cyber exposures that could be exploited by malicious threat actors. With complex technological environments, including in the cloud and containers, as well as expanding supply chain and third-party vendor reliance, Gartner highlights that security and risk management leaders who are aware of their attack surface can improve their risk posture by prioritizing security hygiene and increasing its visibility. LookingGlass is excited to offer you this complimentary Gartner research, Innovation Insight for Attack Surface Management. Visit lookingglass.com/resources to learn more. And we thank LookingGlass Cyber for sponsoring our show. And now, a word from our sponsor, Barracuda. Right now, everyone is talking about cryptocurrency, and the cyber criminals are hiding in the conversation. Cyber criminals use social engineering loaded with urgency and fear to successfully prey on your company, your employees, and your customers. Spear phishing is just one of 13 types of email threats. Barracuda has identified these 13 types and shows you how you can protect your company, your customers, and your reputation. Find out about the 13 email threat types and Barracuda email protection. Get your free ebook at barracuda.com/cyberwire. And we thank Barracuda for sponsoring our show. There are indications that ransomware attacks have slowed down, and many speculate that Russia's war on Ukraine is a likely cause of that slowdown. Some say this lull provides organizations an opportunity to catch up and shore up their defenses. Nick Schneider is president and CEO of Arctic Wolf, and he believes businesses and organizations should be using this time to prepare for the next wave of attacks.
I think that they've gotten a lot more sophisticated, both in the manner in which they attack, but also in their operations themselves. So by doing so, they've been able to get deeper and wider within organizations over an extended period of time. And by doing that, they're able to do a lot more damage or get their hands on a lot more, company information. And as a result, they're able to or decide to act in a way that allows them, to ask for, for more ransom or more, funds to, get the company out of a position that they don't want to be in. And they've done that both through, kind of the capturing and locking of certain data or devices, but also through, I think more recently, some extortion tactics, so, they're real businesses now, so whereas it might have been a little bit more grassroots in years past, some of these organizations have, HR teams and picnics and, things that you'd expect from, a traditional organization. And as a result, they're a lot more sophisticated in the way in which they approach, kind of their business and their tactics.
Given where we stand today, what is your advice for organizations who are looking to dial in, the amount of resources they apply to helping prevent ransomware?
Yeah, I think we have an interesting time right now in that the number of attacks has subsided slightly. So there's been a little bit of a reprieve for organizations. And I think what I've found or what I've heard as I'm talking to, folks in the market is that people take that either as an opportunity to kind of shore up their defenses or, in my opinion, the wrong decision would be, to take a slight lull as an opportunity to, move or allocate budget or priority elsewhere. I believe that any lull that we've seen in ransomware, relatively recently will come back, and it will likely come back and then some, meaning it will come back in a more, meaningful way, than we even saw, prior to a slight slowdown. And those organizations that use a little bit of slowdown in attacks to really firm up their security posture will be the organizations that are in a really good position. And those that have, kind of neglected it, over that period of time, I believe will wish they had. And what to do, or the advice would be to make sure that it's a topic of communication with the executive staff, make sure that it's a topic of discussion with the board, and make sure that you're investing in, your security posture in a material way so that you can ensure that you're protected, over time. And I think as companies do that, they'll find that the best way for them to be protected is to build a solution or build an ecosystem within their own environment that allows them to, deliver multiple outcomes to the business. So how do you detect and respond? How do you, make yourself aware of any potential vulnerabilities? How do you educate, your employee base? How do you set up education around, phishing and social attacks? And then do you have a plan if something does go wrong? So do you have, an incident response, team or a retainer? And tying that all together is going to be what's important for organizations. And unfortunately, that's a tall order for a lot of organizations. So, that's kind of how we specialize, is we like to view ourselves as a security operations cloud that can provide multiple outcomes to a customer. But whether it's Arctic Wolf or not, having a comprehensive plan and leveraging what is a little bit of a lull in activity, I think will be really important for businesses.
It seems as though the rise of cryptocurrency and the rise of ransomware kind of went hand in hand, that, crypto was an enabler for some of these ransomware actors. We've seen signs that perhaps crypto will be regulated or clamped down on. Do you think that might move the needle?
Yeah, I think there's two conversations on this. One is the price of crypto, the price or the value of cryptocurrency. I don't think that will have an impact. They'll just adjust their requests based on, whatever currency that they're, benchmarking the crypto against. The regulations, I think, could have a short-term impact. I don't believe it would be a medium or long-term impact. Again, these organizations are now running significant businesses. To believe that they will just fold up shop with some adversity in the crypto markets, I think is a naive belief. So I do think that those things will likely help in the short run, but I believe in the long run, or even in the medium run, the bad actors will find a way to continue to capitalize on vulnerabilities within an organization's cybersecurity posture.
That's Nick Schneider, President and CEO of Arctic Wolf. There's a lot more to this conversation. If you want to hear more, head on over to the CyberWire Pro and sign up for Interview Selects, where you'll get access to this and many more extended interviews. And I'm joined once again by Malek Ben Salem. She is the Security Innovation Principal Director at Accenture. Malek, it's always great to welcome you back. Recently you and I were chatting about machine learning security and safety, and I wanted to continue that conversation with you about some of the ways that the issues that can come up with these sorts of things can be solved. What can you share with us today?
Yeah, so we talked about machine learning robustness, right, in adversarial settings and in unusual event settings. And I think, there are a few techniques or methods that we can use as machine learning engineers and as people who are developing these systems to make them more robust. One of them, obviously, is the use of robustness frameworks that we need to develop more of, that we need to expand, develop even further, develop benchmarks further to stress test these systems and identify their breaking points. There are techniques related to data augmentation, for instance, that can make these models more robust. For instance, if you have a machine learning model or a computer vision system that is supposed to recognize images, any perturbations in the input images may lead that system to completely misrecognize what's in the image. It has been shown that if you combine the original image with certain fractals, you may be able to make those models more robust against noise to these images. There are techniques related to entropy minimization when building these models. There are techniques in cyber physical environments of including multiple sensors and input streams from multiple sensors. Again, in the self-driving car setting, you don't want to rely just on one camera to make decisions. You want multiple cameras and feed all of those or use all of those feeds from those cameras to interpret what's going on in the surrounding environment. And there are also techniques around how to train these the models running behind or running within these systems using adversarial data points. So preemptively creating adversarial data that a threat actor may create and using those to train the models. There are special adversarial training techniques that have been shown to be more robust than others. The smooth adversarial training technique is one of them. And then finally, I think we need to, as a community, we need to have some way of verifying the adversarial robustness of these models. So in some sort, having programs that can certify how robust these models are to adversarial attacks. And, again, that's a community effort that will require some work, some collaboration. It's important if we are to deploy these AI systems and be confident and trust them. I've seen most recently a program launched by researchers in Stanford University to call for attention to these problems. It's sort of like a bug bounty program. They're offering basically tens of thousands of dollars as rewards to people who can identify security bugs in these machine learning models.
I recently saw a video that was making the rounds, and it was a Tesla that was in a self-driving mode, looking and you could see how it was interpreting its environment, and it came up behind a horse and carriage, like a Cinderella kind of horse and carriage, big fancy carriage and a whole team of horses, and the system didn't know what to make of it. It could not figure out what it was, and that struck me as an example here of, how do you put a Cinderella carriage in your edge cases, and how do you decide what your fail-safe mode is if you come across something like that?
Exactly. That's exactly the challenge. It's very difficult to predict what are these rare events that these systems will encounter when they are deployed in a real-world environment. So again, it's important then to train them or to expose them to these edge cases. And one way of doing that is by creating sort of, out of distribution data sets and using them to train the models. There are some synthetic data generators that can be leveraged for developing these synthetic data sets and importantly, out of distribution data sets. So
I'm reminded of that. I think it's a military axiom that no battle plan survives contact with the enemy. And I wonder if that applies, to putting vehicles and things out in the real world, that, the set of possibilities is just practically infinite.
Oh, yeah. And actually, that brings me to another point that is important also for making these ML systems secure and safe. So we talked about robustness, right? And preparing them to deal with cases that they're not used to. But it's also equally important to have capabilities embedded within these systems or outside of these systems to detect anomalies, right? If they're deployed, how can I detect and respond to a situation that is abnormal? So, in the case of, again, self-driving systems, you may, one could say, these are not fully autonomous. Maybe we'll have people eventually oversee a fleet of, self-driving cars, or, if you have Uber self-driving cars, you will have operators monitoring them. And that's important. But in that case, you'll need to have the ability of the car or the AI system to recognize that a situation is abnormal, and you need to have that in a manner where the signal to noise ratio is high, right? So you don't want to overwhelm these operators with alerts that will cause alert fatigue, and then that will defeat the purpose of them monitoring these systems. So that's another important factor. Having or developing the ability for these systems to recognize anomalies, to recognize unusual situations, that comes as a trade-off with building robustness, right? So on the one hand, you want them to recognize these unusual events and respond to them appropriately. On the other hand, you want them to recognize them as anomalous, and drawing the line between the two cases is not always, straightforward.
All right. Well, interesting stuff as always. Malek Ben Salem, thanks for joining us. This episode of the CyberWire is made possible in part by ExtraHop. It's becoming clear that today's attacks can't be prevented, but they can be stopped. Modern cyber attackers have already made it inside your network, but you have the upper hand. Find and eradicate threats with ExtraHop network detection and response, and shut them out before real damage is done. Learn the advanced techniques attackers are using and how ExtraHop stops them with a live attack simulation. Visit extrahop.com/cyberwire. That's extrahop.com/cyberwire. And that's the CyberWire. For links to all of today's stories, check out our daily briefing at thecyberwire.com. Be sure to check out this weekend's Research Saturday and my conversation with Federico Kirschbaum from Faraday Security. We're discussing a vulnerability in Realtek's SDK for ECOS OS, honing thousands of routers. That's Research Saturday. Do check it out. The CyberWire podcast is a production of N2K Networks, proudly produced in Maryland out of the startup studios of Data Tribe, where they're co-building the next generation of cybersecurity teams and technologies. Our amazing CyberWire team is Elliot Peltzman, Trey Hester, Brandon Karp, Eliana White, Guru Prakash, Liz Irvin, Rachel Gelfin, Tim Nodar, Joe Kerrigan, Carol Terrio, Maria Varmatsis, Ben Yellen, Nick Valecki, Gina Johnson, Bennett Moe, Catherine Murphy, Janine Daly, Chris Russell, John Petrick, Jennifer Iben, Rick Howard, Peter Kilpie, Simone Petrella, and I'm Dave Bittner. Thanks for listening. We'll see you back here next week. This episode of the CyberWire is made possible in part by Collide. Collide is an endpoint security solution that uses the most powerful untapped resource in IT, end users. Collide notifies your team via Slack when their devices are insecure and gives them step-by-step instructions to solve the issue. For IT admins, Collide provides a single dashboard that lets you monitor your entire fleet, whether they're running on Mac, Windows, or Linux. That visibility makes it easy to prove compliance to auditors. You can meet your compliance goals by putting users first. Visit collide.com/CyberWire Daily to find out how.